So from this session, we'll start project framework, which is called as hybrid framework. So we'll first learn about what is a framework, why we need the framework, and what are the different types of frameworks we have. And then we'll discuss about hybrid framework, what are the different stages in hybrid framework. We'll go through that, and then we'll start the actual, we'll take one application and we'll take that as a application for project, and we'll complete the framework for that application. So that's the agenda. So let's start about the framework. So what is a framework? So a framework is used for organizing a project related files in a proper structure, in a proper order structure, right? So that is what we call it as a framework. So a framework is used for organizing the project related files. Like we have seen, right? So when we are automating the test cases, and also when we are writing the page object model, say for example, right? We have page object classes for each page, and we have test cases for the related page object class. So we have been putting everything in under one bucket, like under one package, right? So that's not the right order. So you have to put them in an organized manner. Like, say for example, one package should hold all test cases. One package should hold all page object classes. So there has to be a separate folder for having the resources. There has to be separate package for utility classes, like that. So it has to be organized so that it will be beneficial for anyone else who actually works on the framework, right, on the same project, right? So they will be easily understanding what has been written for the project, right? So that's the advantage, and that is what we mean by framework. So in simple terms, framework is used for organizing the project related files in a proper order. So that is what we mean by a project framework, right? So why we need frameworks? So we need frameworks for different reasons. So reusability. So reusability is the first benefit we get, right? Reusability means frameworks provide a reusable set of tools, components, and best practices, right? That can be applied across different projects. So this actually reduces the need to write the code from scratch, right? So once we write something, we frame something, then we can reuse this for other test cases or other tasks as well within the project. So this actually reduces the need to write the code from scratch for any, say for example, module. So one module you write framework for, and we can reuse that for other modules as well. So this actually reduces the need to write the code from scratch, and there won't be any redundant code once we actually follow any framework for writing the project, for developing a project, right? So that is what reusability means. And what is, and the second benefit we get is maintainability. So maintainability. So what is maintainability? So we should be able to, once we develop a framework, so once we write a project using a framework, so we should be able to update or modify, or even in some cases, we wanted to extend the applications as requirements change over time, right? So this is crucial for mainly for long-term projects. So which needs to adapt to evolve for the upcoming needs, right? So in that case, maintainability is crucial. So once we write the framework, it has to be such a way that even in future, we should be able to update it or modify something, or we have, or if you wanted to extend it to some applications, right? So as per our requirements, so it has to be adaptable for that. So that's how a framework has to be. And once you write a framework, right? So that's the flexibility we get. We can easily update, modify, or even extend extend the application, right? So that it is still adaptable and it still works. It should not break. There should not be multiple changes. So in future, if you wanted to modify something or if you wanted to add something to the project, so it should not affect the existing functionality. You should be able to easily perform that or do that without any redundant or it should not be like a tedious job. It should not be so hard that adding something should change the entire structure. So that's the advantage of framework. Once you write the framework, so the maintainability is assured. We can easily update, modify the existing code, right? So this is mainly crucial for the long-term projects. Some projects goes years together, right? So in such cases, so according to any requirement, so it should be adaptable. So it will be adaptable. That's the advantage of writing a framework. And next comes scalability. So the ability of a software system, right? So or any framework to handle an increasing amount of work. So there could be increasing amount of work. So you develop the framework assuming some quantity of work, but that could increase with time, right? So it should be the framework ensures that so it handles the increasing amount of work, right? So this actually involves the ability to manage more data, more users, or there could be more transactions coming up. So as the application grows, right? So all this has to once you write the framework, right? A framework will assure you that so even in future, if there is an increased amount of work load on the application, right? So it will make sure that the framework makes sure that so it has the ability to manage more data, more resources like users, more transactions. It should be able to handle. It will handle, right? So that's the advantage of framework. So we will get the scalability part. So once we write the framework, so the application will be scalable, easily scalable. And readability. So what is readability? Readability is so the code will be well organized. It will be well documented and it follows some consistent naming convention so that it becomes easier to understand and modify. So say for example, the project will be huge, right? So once you start the project, there will be some team and the team actually works together and writes a code for the project, right? To develop an application. So the code written should be well organized because, like, say for example, after some months or some years, so people will be adding into the team. People will be moved from one team to other. So in that case, so the newcomers coming into the team should not feel it difficult to read the code. So once you provide the project code, so with minimal KT, with minimal knowledge transfer, so the code should be understood by the newcomers who come into the project, who joins the project, right? So framework again like ensures that the code is well organized, it is well documented, and it always follows the consistent naming convention. So that it will be easier for anyone, any newcomers, right? Who comes into the project or anyone who wants to actually work on the project temporarily also, so they can easily read the code. So it will be easily understood for making any changes. So that's about another benefit of why we need to have a framework for a project. So the main benefit is readability. So these are the major benefits. Reusability, so reduction of redundant code and reusing the code, right? So that's reusability. Maintainability, so we can update, modify the applications for the long-term projects according to the evolving needs. Scalability, so it should be able to handle the increasing amount of work. So once you write the project or framework, so it should be able to manage more data, more users or transactions. Readability, so the code should be the code will be well organized and well documented so that it will become easier to understand and modify the code for the newcomers to the project. So these are the major benefits of having a framework for a project. Now we'll see what are the types of frameworks we have. So we do have two types of frameworks: predefined frameworks and user-defined frameworks. You can even say this as customized frameworks. What are predefined frameworks? So JUnit, TestNG, we have seen TestNG, right? Cucumber, robot framework, all these are the built-in frameworks or the predefined frameworks. So JUnit is used to mainly used for developers for unit testing. So TestNG is an extension of JUnit. So whatever features are there in JUnit will be there in the TestNG as well. It has more features like reporting and so on, right? So TestNG is also some kind of predefined framework. So the framework has already been there and has been named, right? So we just need to use that framework. That's all. So it's already developed by someone else. So we just need to use that framework, which is called as predefined framework and is available globally. So that's called as predefined frameworks. So Cucumber is another framework. So Cucumber is a BDD, behavior driven development framework. So yeah, which uses Gherkin language. So that's one type of framework, robot framework, like this. So we have different frameworks, which are predefined frameworks. We call them as predefined frameworks. These are already written. We just need to learn them to include that into our projects. Like how we have seen TestNG, right? So we just need to add the library of TestNG and we were able to use the all features of TestNG because it has been designed in such a way that so the framework has been written. So in such a way that it can be used for a particular requirement, right? So we use TestNG for different purposes, right? So we parameterized it. Like using TestNG, we were able to execute the only particular test cases. We were able to group the test cases. All these kind of features we have seen, right? So that's happened because of like it has been designed and developed in such a way that it can actually solve some problem, right? So that's one type of framework. So in the same way, we do have multiple predefined frameworks. So we just need to use that framework which are existing already, right? Next comes the user-defined frameworks. User-defined frameworks. User-defined frameworks are like, data-driven framework. We have seen data-driven framework. So data-driven framework is all about like for test data, what we do, we maintain an Excel file and Excel or XML file, and we can read the data from that file. So that would be typically a test data. We'll actually put test data in an Excel file. So we'll separate the test data from the code and we'll put it in an external file like Excel file or XML file, and we read the data using some third-party libraries like Apache POA, and then we pass that data to our test cases, right? So this is what we have seen already, and this is what we call it as data-driven framework. So this we do actually, we write the framework for it, right? So it's not existing. So but we do write classes and we do write methods for this to happen, to actually read the data and pass it on to our test cases or test methods, right? So we have seen this, right? So this is what we call it as user-defined framework, and one of the example is data-driven framework. In the same way, we do have something called keyword-driven framework as well. So keyword-driven is also similar to data-driven framework, but here what we usually do is we actually have the web elements as well. Like, objects are stored as keywords. For example, username, say, password, and login button, right? So in that case, what we do is instead of actually locating the elements directly into the code using XPath or any other locator, what we usually do is we store these objects as keywords in an Excel file or an XML file, these web elements. And then whenever these web elements are required in our project, right, in our test cases, then we read this file and then we actually get the locators for the web elements, the particular web elements. So till now, like we have been writing directly into the code, right, into the .java file. So instead of that, we can separate this web element locators into separate third-party file, and then we can read the file whenever we wanted to interact with these elements. So at the beginning, before any at the starting of automation, so this approach used to be followed. But later on, when Selenium was introduced, so we didn't we people actually stopped using this keyword-driven framework after introduction of Selenium. So before that, mostly any automation tool used to depend like this. So the web elements will be stored in some separate file, and we'll read those web elements from the file according to the requirement, and then interact with those web elements. That used to happen like that. So that's what we call it as keyword-driven framework, because objects are stored as keywords. So objects in the sense web elements here. So they are stored as keywords. So we used to read those keywords. So that's the reason for the name, keyword-driven framework. Next comes hybrid framework. So hybrid framework is something like a combination of data-driven and keyword-driven framework, or it is a combination of you know two one or more two or more frameworks. The existing or user-defined frameworks will be there, right? So two or more frameworks. Like if we combine all these frameworks, we call it as hybrid framework. So for example, we combine like WebDriver, TestNG, Maven, Jenkins, GitHub. So all these we combine. All these are different types of framework, but we combine all of this to form one framework, which we call it as hybrid framework. So we know WebDriver, we know TestNG, right? So Maven is a build tool. So which actually takes the entire code and gives us a build. And then Jenkins is another one like which automatically triggers a build, and which is used to trigger the build, and it can actually has the ability to execute some sanity test cases. Git and GitHub are like source controls where the code will be maintained. So once the code is written by multiple developers, so it has to be pushed on to somewhere, right? So it will be put onto some repositories. So these are like global repositories where we can actually have the different versions of our code stored. These are called as repositories, or we can call this as source controls. Like this, if we combine multiple frameworks and write a project, right? So that's called as hybrid framework. That we call it as hybrid framework, right? So this is all about the types of frameworks. So majorly we have two types of frameworks: predefined frameworks and user-defined frameworks, which we will call it as customized. Because this is customized, because we can include, for example, if you take hybrid framework, we are actually customizing some framework. So using the existing framework, we actually combine all of them to have a new framework, right? So that's the name. That's called customized, right? So mainly we'll actually write our project using hybrid framework. We are gonna use all of this, right? This is about the types of frameworks. So we'll be using the so any framework, right? So if you choose, so it has to be actually it undergoes some phases, or we can call it as some stages, or let's call it as some phases. So what are the different phases a framework has? So we have to undergo some different phases. If you choose to develop, if you choose one framework, right? So we have to go through some phases. The first one is analysis. So given an application, right? So till now, like we have discussed like in terms of development even, right? Like say for example, you wanted to develop some application. So this is what we need to understand. So for any developing any application, right? So framework is crucial. So because it is used for organizing the project related files and in a proper order, right? So and why we need framework we have seen, and what are the different types of frameworks we have seen, right? So now we'll actually go through like why and we have chosen hybrid framework for our project, right? For in the testing point of view. And now we'll actually discuss morely on the QA point of view, like why, how, what are the different phases for a framework in the QA point of view, right? So what are the different phases? So the first phase is like analysis. So once the application, so we know the application, which has to be automated, right? As a team, so the QA team has to analyze. So this is the application we are gonna automate or we are gonna validate. So for this application to validate, like what's the technology used for the, so what is the technology used for the application? So what are the tools available for automating this kind of technology? So like can we automate like how feasible is that tool for this application? So is that licensed or open source tool? And how many number of pages we have to automate for this application? What are the different types of elements in this application? How we need to identify the elements? Uh, what are the different, how many, what will be the count of the elements? All these comes under the analysis phase. So the first phase will be analysis phase, where we will not actually, we will as a teamwork. So QA team actually sits as a team and then they discuss, they analyze the application. So all these types of things they analyze, like the number of web pages of the application, what technologies will be used, and what will be the best automation tools that we can use to automate, right? And what will be the uh, technologies used for those automation tools again? Are they licensed or open source? So how we need to write, like what skill set is required if we need to use the automation tool. All this will be discussed in the analysis phase. Next, once that is done, so we'll choose test cases for automation. So this is important. So how to choose test cases for automation? So once analysis phase is done, so in the analysis phase, we'll even discuss what will be the manual. So what are the, so some pages which can't, which will be only done by manual. So manual testing, what will be the manual testing effort? All those things will be discussed in the analysis phase. So once that phase is done, so the second phase is choosing test cases for automation. So you might be heard like this tag, right? Like this jargon, like people saying 100% automation. So what does 100% automation is? So say for example, suppose you have 100 test cases. So your application, you have been, as a team, you have written some 100 test cases, right? So in these 100 test cases, say for example, you identify only 90 test cases which can be automatable. So this is important. So only 90 test cases can be automatable, because there could be some test cases which are not automatable. For example, so there is some graph. You can't actually automate the graph, right? There is some captcha. You can't actually automate the captcha. That's the main purpose of captcha, right? So it actually verifies you as a human or not. So any automated software can't actually, bypass the captcha. Right? In such case, you can't automate that. So likewise, say for example, some font, you can't automate it. Size, font, right? Colors, all these kind of things we can't actually automate, but we still need to test those test cases as well. We need to validate them, right? So anything developers or an application has to undergo validation. right? So, and if it has to undergo the validation, it has to be designed like a test case. So there has to be some test case. Only then picking up the test cases, a QA team can actually execute the test case and mark it as pass or failure, right? So in such cases, like that type of test cases, like graph, captcha, font size, colors, all like this type of automation test cases can't be automated. So this has to be chosen. We have some test cases. For example, 100 test cases we have. We'll identify what are the test cases which can be automatable. For example, we identify 90 test cases can be automated. And automation team works on this test case, picks up these test cases, and for example, they automated like say for example, only 80% automation is done. So 80% of the automation is done. So what is 80% of 90? It is like 72 test cases, right? 72 test cases are automated, right? So because we said like 80% automation is done for our projects. So whenever we say 100% automation, it is not about 100 test cases here. It is about only 90 test cases because the test cases which can be automatable itself is 90, right? So this we need to remember. The test cases which can be automatable itself is 90. So we have to consider this as a 100%. So if you are able to automate 90 test cases which are all automatable, then that becomes 100% automation. It's not about 100 test cases. You have to remember this. So what are all the automatable test cases? So that number becomes the actual number we have to pick up for calculating the percentage of automation, right? So in this example, like there are 90 test cases and we automated only 72 test cases. In that case, we can only say like 80% automation done. If we are able to complete the other 18 test cases, 90 minus 72 is 18, right? So if you are able to complete the other 18 test cases which are automatable, which we can automate, then we can say 100% automation is achieved for that application, right? So this is the calculation. So we have to choose what are all the test cases for automation and in this phase. So how do we choose? So first we need to choose sanity test cases. So what are sanity test cases? So testing usually is performed after receiving a new build or version, right? So, okay, let me explain you that. Usually what happens is, so in real time, what usually happens is like, say for example, this is all like one team, right? So one team, and you will have multiple developers. So we'll have multiple developers who are actually working on the application, right? So they actually check in the code to some source control. It could be GitHub or any other source control, right? So they check in the code. Now, what usually happens is like QA team, they will be waiting for the build. What is build is? So say for example, each developer might be working on some module of the application, right? So there has to be some consolidated uh, place where all this code is consolidated, right? So that place is what we call the source control, and this is the place where we have the complete code. But the complete code is there, but we can't actually test the code as a QA team, right? So they need something like an application, right? So that is like a file has to be there for installing the application. So how do we usually install a software? So we do get the in Windows, we get the when we wanted to install some application, we do get some file called exe file, right? Executable file. So upon getting that file, we install that file and then we get the application. And then we start using the application, right? So in the same way, like developers actually write the code for the application and push it onto some source control. And from this, there will be some build tools like, and Maven, Gradle, like this, which actually gets this, that gets the code from this source control and actually builds, generates a build. Build is a exe file. Just you can think it of like one exe file. So this Maven actually say for example, Maven is a build tool. So it actually reads the code from this source control and generates a build. That is a exe file. So once we get this exe file, so this will be passed on to the QA team. Our QA team picks up this exe file, this build from the Maven tool. Once this is generated. So all that we need is one file for installing the application, right? So this is how the exe file is generated for QA team, right? So then upon receiving this exe file, the QA team actually installs the application using this exe file, and then they start the testing, right? So this is what we call it as a build, right? And so the build is like the build tool, which actually picks up the code from the source control, which has a consolidated code, and then it generates an exe file for Windows, right? So that is what we call it as a build, remember, right? And during this phase, so QA team can't pick up all the builds because like the builds will be generated, multiple builds will be generated automatically. So all this again will be done by some tools called Jenkins. So Jenkins, uh, Jenkins will be an automated build tool, which actually, so Maven is some kind of, we have seen Maven, right? So we can write the Maven projects. So upon after writing this Maven project, right, this Jenkins actually picks up all this the code from the source control, and it actually generates the build. So once these builds are generated, this will be passed on to QA. But what happens in between is like the Jenkins, say for example Jenkins tool, right? So this actually generates nightly build and also multiple builds upon check-in. So we call it as check-in. Once a developer pushes this code into the source control, right? So that we call it as check-in. So the continuously this process will be done. Continuously this will be checked in, right? So mostly like multiple builds will be triggered even per day, or we can control how many builds can be generated per day, right? So if we get daily one build, so it becomes like a tedious job for QA team to manage this builds itself, right? So QA team will not pick up build daily. Instead of that, whenever they wanted to pick up one build, right? So they will actually see the quality of the build. So not all the builds will be having the quality because one developer checks in today. So same developer or within the same team, multiple developers will be working on different modules. And upon check-in of one developer, so that check-in might actually conflict, or there could be some issues with this check-in because there will be definitely dependency upon from one module to other module because they're all working on same application, right? So in such cases, some things might not work as expected. In that case, the build will not be stable. But if QA actually picks up this builds and starts working on it, all that effort is, that is time consuming and all that effort is like waste, right? So what they usually do is, so QA team will have some sanity test cases written. So sanity test cases are like, so they will be tested to actually test the quality of the software or the application. So they will pick up the new build only to ensure that the specific changes or fixes made by developers have been successfully implemented without introducing the new bugs. So there should not be any new bugs introduced in the new build, right? So they might fix something, or developers might have made some changes, but that should not introduce the new bugs. That will be that will be ensured. So in such that cases we call it as sanity test cases. So we write some sanity test cases, and sanity test cases will be automatically again be you know validated by Jenkins. So how does Jenkins does that is, so it gets the exe file, right? So you can even write the commands and scripts in Jenkins so that this exe will be used to install the application in some particular machine. So even the machine we can specify that in that machine, the build will be installed. And also if we have the sanity test cases written by automation team, then that can be passed on to this team. Like this Jenkins build, this will be actually done by a separate dedicated team in the industry called DevOps team. So this team will actually pass it as a QA team, will pass the sanity test cases. So that what happens, this DevOps teams, so using this Jenkins, they actually generate the build, also install the build. Installing the build actually gets at the application on some machine. So in that machine, they actually run this sanity test cases. So these sanity test cases, they will run it. And once the sanity test cases are passed, right, this will be minimum set just to test the quality of the build. Then once all the test cases or all the expected test cases are passed on that build, then QA team will know that at least the sanity has passed for this build. Then they will pick up this build and they will test. They will start their testing. So this is the whole process happens in real time. Now, why we are actually discussing all this is, now you'll get it. Let me show you. So let's go back to our this phase where we have different phases where we are discussing different phases, right? Analysis phase. Now choosing test cases for automation. So how do you choose the test case? We first need to choose the sanity test cases. So we got to sanity test cases, right? Why we need to develop, why we need to take the first priority as sanity test cases for automation is, so once we have the sanity test cases, then that can be used by the DevOps team to run these sanity test cases to test them, to validate the quality of the build, right? So first priority will be given for the sanity test cases. So sanity test cases, in the sense, they ensure that the specific changes or any fixes by developers, so they have been successfully implemented without introducing new bugs, right? So that's the purpose of automating the sanity test cases. So that we treat it as T1. T1 in the sense priority one. So we give them the highest priority. And then retesting. We give second priority for retesting. Retesting is like so we test the specific test cases that actually previously failed. So due to identified defects. Identified defects is you are actually validating your application manually and you identified some defects. So we report them to the concerned development team. So after the defects have been fixed, right? So a new build will be generated, right? So the primary goal is to ensure that the specific issues have been resolved. So the build which was given has to actually have the resolution for the identified defects and then the functionality now works as expected. So the only that part will test it in the retesting, right? So manually we have identified some defects and we have reported them to the developers. And the fixes for specific defects have been done and a build will be released, right? So that we wanted to test it. And this we don't want it to repeat it again and again using manual testing. So that type of test cases we automate. So that we call it as retesting. So it mainly focuses on the previously failed test cases. All those we'll group it and we'll call them as the previously failed test cases. So then we'll run them. We'll run the automation on such group of failed test cases, previously failed test cases, right? So that is what we call it as retesting, and we'll take those type of test cases as priority to test cases, and we'll automate them. So the first part will be sanity test cases because that ensures the quality of the build, either to pick up that build for further validation, QA validation or not, will be decided by the sanity test cases. So we'll take them as a priority one and we'll automate them first. And then retesting. Retesting is all about previously failed test cases. We'll pick up them and we'll start automating them. And then comes the regression. Regression test cases. And remember, like, so automation will not start from the beginning itself. Like, say, for example, in the initial phase, the application will be like, will be having very basic features, right? So the project might be huge, but it has to actually go through the development in phases, right? So at beginning, there will be very minimal features and there could be many defects in the in the project, in the application, right? So it's not like a good practice to start automating at the beginning stages itself. So the application has to become stable. At least a minimum features has to be working. And how do you know that? So when you actually perform some manual testing during the initial phases, you will come to know the quality of the application. Then if you think that it is stable, then actually we start automating the test cases. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense, right? So if you are actually performing manual testing itself, there are some defects, then you can't even go ahead with the automation. So first, in initial phases, we actually perform the manual testing. And once we think that it is good enough, if the application is good enough if it's good enough, it is stable, then we can actually start picking up the automation test cases and we'll start the automation. And we'll automate the test cases in this order, right? Then comes the regression test cases. So regression test cases, like it is a process of, we test the overall application. Uh, why we test this? To ensure the recent code changes. So there could be multiple changes, right? So there could be many changes coming up for every build. So we have to ensure that the recent code changes, like code changes in the sense code can be changed for fixing the bugs raised by the QA manual team, and there could be some enhancements to the application. There could be new features or enhancements, right? Or bug fixes. All these kind of changes, we call it as a recent code changes, right? So they should not actually affect the existing functionality. There could be some features which are stable and which might be working already. So, and new changes might be coming on the code, right? So that new changes like bug fixes or enhancements or new features of the application might be introduced, might be developed and put it in the new build. But this new build, right? So this should not affect the existing functionality which is already working fine, right? So we have to ensure that. So that we call it as regression test cases. Mostly regression test cases is like a superset of sanity test cases. So if you remember, even sanity test cases is that is what we said, right? So any specific changes or fixes should be successfully implemented without introducing the new bugs, right? So we can call sanity as subset of minimal set of regression tests, right? Regression is exhaustive, like it actually includes overall application. So it includes test cases of overall applications, which should ensure that the code changes, the recent code changes, the new changes haven't affected the existing functionality. So that's what we call it as regression test cases. So regression test cases will be more. Sanity will be very minimal set, right? Regression will be more number. So the purpose of both test cases are same. Like the testing of sanity and regression is same. So it should not introduce the new bugs, but it will be minimal set and regression will be exhaustive. So so that's about regression testing, and we will pick up as a priority 3. So we'll come in this order. We'll actually follow this order usually in real time when we are automating, when we wanted to automate the test cases, when we wanted to pick up the automation test cases. So this is the order we follow. This is the priority, right? So the main goal of regression testing is to catch the new bugs that might have been introduced as a result of the changes. So as a result of the change, if there are any new bugs, that has to be caught, right? That's the main goal of performing the regression testing. And how we can perform that? So there could be several test cases, right? So that you can't definitely do it as a manually. That will be a tedious job, and we might need like many resources. So in that case, we'll pick up all those test cases, regression test cases, and we'll start automating. Automation team starts automating those regression test cases, right? Even automating the regression test cases might take some time, but that is single time effort. Once we write the script, right? So we have seen this. So once we write the script, that can be run multiple times, any number of times in future, right? So that's the advantage of automation. And mainly like we'll start automating the regression test cases once we are done with automating the sanity test case and retesting test case. Retesting is done, right? Next. Next is like any test cases. We can call it as others, right? Like, performance test cases. There could be accessibility test cases, security. We wanted to validate security. So in that accessibility test cases, all these comes under miscellaneous or others. So we can just call it as test cases that can be automatable. First, we'll follow this order, and then if there are any remaining ones, then we actually pick up this. So this is the order we need to follow, like when we wanted to choose the automation test cases, which test cases we wanted to automate, right? So this is about the second phase, how to choose the test cases for automation. Now we'll come to the next phase, which is called as design phase, design and development phase. So design and development of framework. So here we actually we'll see. So this is the main step which we discussed here, right? So what are the types of frameworks, right? So at this phase, so as a team, like mostly like leads and managers, they will actually decide what will be the framework, what framework we are going to develop for our automation, for automating this particular application, and what will be the design. So what framework we are going to develop, that discussion will happen here, and that comes under design, and development also will start. So mostly like leads will be writing the framework. So they will design and develop the framework. They will discuss what has to be the framework, and they will start writing the framework for the application, and that will be the initial step, right? Once that framework is designed, right, and developed by the QA team, then that can be reused by multiple testers within the team. So the automation testers, so they can actually automate the other test cases. Like they can actually reuse the framework. They will use the framework to actually write the test cases, like automate the test cases, right? So once the framework is ready, right? So the looking the framework, so it will be readable is what we said, right? So the framework will be chosen, and once it is developed, then all the developers within the QA team, which are like who are like called as automation testers, they will pick up the test cases, and they will start developing the automation scripts for the test cases. So that will be done in this phase. So design will be done for like design is like deciding what type of framework, and how we will be writing the framework, and yeah, what are all the test cases will be chosen for this uh, for this application is what will be decided at this phase, and the development will also be done at this phase, main step. So this will take long time, months together, sometimes years together. This phase will take, because this involves the development, right? So when we say development, it's all about writing the automation scripts for the test cases, right? So that happens at this phase, third phase, development phase, right? Development of the framework. Now, once that is the execution part. So it need not be like we will not actually, even though we are writing like in phases, so this will not be complete. So development can be like, so say for example, I have 10 modules in my application. We can even write, even the development happens in modules, right? So they will not actually wait for till all the modules are completed. They will be they'll be checking in the code, and will be getting the builds according to the modules, right? So in the same way, like automation also will develop the automation fix, and the code will be checked for the automation. So that part can be executed. Whatever are the test cases are automated till now can be executed. So how do we execute? We are actually execute like using TestNG framework. We can execute. We can group the test cases and we can execute. We can do the parallel testing, and we can actually mainly we can execute it locally or remotely as well. So what does that mean? So local in the sense, like you develop as a tester, you develop some test cases, and you run it on your machine to validate those test cases if your automation scripts are working according to our expectation or not. That you test it, you validate it in your machine, in your own machine. That is called as local execution. So what is remote execution is, so we push the code that is in the source control repository. Then that will be picked up by some build tools, or that will be that we'll use and we'll run it on the remote machines using Selenium grid, right? So on a different machines. So not on your machine, the same code will be run on a different machine. So we'll trigger the remote execution from one machine, but the actual test cases will be executed on a different machine. So that we call it as remote execution. So this happens at this phase. So at the execution phase, we will have the local execution as well as the remote execution. Local execution is usually done by the independent automation testers. Remote execution will be done like we can even done the small set of test cases also remotely. But usually, what when we execute remotely is so when we have like considerable amount of test cases to be executed, then we actually trigger the test cases to execute remotely on a different machine, on a remote machine, right? So that is what happens at the execution phase. And last one comes maintenance phase. So we have to maintain all this code, right? So for maintaining all this code, like we will have the source control, and we'll maintain the code there, and we'll see that all the code which is checked in is like is secure, and it should not have any conflicts, and the build tool should be able to pick up this code from this source control. All this comes up whatever we have discussed, right? Like maintaining the code, like Jenkins build actually picking up the code from the source control, and generating the builds, and providing the exe files to the QA team, executing the sanity test cases, and then providing the quality of the build. So all these comes under the maintenance, how we actually maintain this entire project, right? And maintenance also includes like documentation as well, documentation of the project, the entire project, so that any newcomers, so they actually go through the documentation and they should be onboarded quickly. All that comes under the maintenance phase. So this is all about the different phases for a framework, right? So this we need to follow. Now we are going to develop the framework, right? So we wanted to choose a project, any project you choose. So this that has to undergo this phases, all these phases it has to undergo. If you choose any framework, right? Framework in the sense now in this point of view we wanted to automate some project, some application. So we wanted to write a framework, and it has to undergo all these phases. Now we'll see what application we are going to automate as a part of our project. So before actually understanding that, so we need to understand domains. So there will be different domains in the industry. For example, so insurance is one domain, right? Finance can be one domain, telecom, banking, education, like this, healthcare. All these are different types of domains, right? So people usually when they start working, right? So one domain, then they usually continue working on the same domain so that they will have some domain specific knowledge. So domain specific knowledge is also very important. Say for example, if you take banking, right? So banking will involve multiple terminology, right? So the usual person can't understand the terminology. They will see some regarding the transactions in EFT, IMPS, UPA, like this. So there will be different terminologies, right? So even in fixed deposit, there will be multiple types like that, right? So all those terminologies will come under when you actually work on some banking application, right? So you will come to know, or you learn all those terminologies and all those knowledge you'll come to know when you work on some specific domain. For example, banking is what we discussed, right? So in the same way, each domain has its own terminology within it, right? So that level of domain knowledge is also important. So people who actually works on some domain, they prefer to usually continue working on the domain so that they will actually develop that skill set on the domain, and they will actually continue their career on that particular domain. Even the companies choose the resources, right? So based on the domain knowledge, based on the domain knowledge also, it will be an added advantage along with the skill set which you have for the usual QA, like manual testing and automation testing. along with the domain knowledge is also important. And what's the domain is? These are all different domains, and each domain will have its own terminology within it and its own knowledge. Like it will have its own keywords or terminology within it, right? So that's about the domains. One such domain is e-commerce. So nowadays, e-commerce websites and e-commerce has become very famous, right? And even the future will also be e-commerce. Enter will be e-commerce, right? So e-commerce is electronic commerce. So we actually buy something online. So you don't need to shop something offline. So usually what we usually do, like we used to actually, in order to buy something earlier, like say for example 20 years back like that, so or even 15 years back like that, we usually step into some store and then we buy whatever we wanted, right? It could be apparel, it could be anything, right? So anything, we groceries, anything, we used to actually step into the store and then we used to buy. Now after after e-commerce is introduced, you don't need to step out, right? So you just need to place your order online, then that will be delivered onto your home directly, right? So that's the main advantage of e-commerce, right? So you can buy the things online. Anything you can buy online. That's the advantage of e-commerce. And there has been like tons of e-commerce websites nowadays we see, right? So like Amazon, Flipkart, Snapdeal, and so on, right? So these are all like e-commerce. So all these comes under e-commerce. And to develop these applications, again, there we need like multiple resources working on this, right? So who the company who whichever is developing this e-commerce website, right? So that needs resources. Resources like team, who quality team, like who development team, quality QA teams like that, right? So they need multiple teams within it. So we'll focus on QA team. Say for example, QA team is working on the e-commerce domain. They need to have the all understanding domain knowledge as well for the e-commerce. So whoever works on the e-commerce, they will have that knowledge, or they will learn that knowledge once if they are newcomers, right? So mainly if we are talking about e-commerce domain, right? So there are two types of operations. So front-end operations, which will be used by the customers, or you can say users. So what will be the front-end operations? So you need to register your account, and then you need to log into your account. And then what we usually do for an e-commerce application, we first search for the product or item, right? And then what you do, we can add, we can edit or products, remove the products from cart, search for the product, and then we can add the products to the cart. And then we'll actually go to we'll be navigated to we'll order the product, right? We'll order the product by going the payment gateway. And then once it is delivered, we'll review. We can write, we can provide the rating, and we can provide our reviews and so on, right? So these are all the typical operations which we perform as a customer on an e-commerce website, right? So these are all called as front-end operations. This we call it as usually front-end operations, right? For example, let me show you an example. If you take this, right? So this is one e-commerce. So it's actually open cart. So once you log in, this is all the front. This is what we call it as front end. This is open cart, and you can see here, it has desktops. It has different different items here, right? Cameras, tablets. You can see softwares. You can click on it, and you can choose. You can choose the item whichever you wanted, and you can Like you can just add it to the cart like this. You can choose the quantity and you can add it to the cart, and then maybe once you add it to the cart, right? I think we need to log in for this. So usually this is what we usually do, right? Like we add it to the cart and then we actually place the order, right? We actually, after adding it to the cart, we usually place the order. So all these operations, we do it on the front end, right? So in the same way, like we do have something called at the back end. So for example, to this open cart hash, so just click on demo. So this open cart is something like it is providing the demo e-commerce application. So you can actually download this open cart, customize according to your requirement, and then you can deploy it as well, right? So it has two parts, front end and administration part, which we call it as back end. So front end is what we discussed, like, right? So front end is something like you actually register the account as a customer, you log in, you search for the product, then you add the cart and all these operations we know, right? Typical operations that we perform in an e-commerce website will come under front end. And what is administration? This is something new to us. So this is back end operations. So there, as we have the front end operations, we do have something called back end operations as well. So in this back end operations, admin team, like admins who are like working for that e-commerce. So admins, or we call it as this backend team. So they, what they usually do is they actually check some kind of, they will have a different application altogether. It will not be accessible by the usual customers or users. So this is something a special kind of application backend where we can use the, so a special kind of application where the access will be provided only for the administrators or the backend teams of the particular e-commerce company, right? So it will be provided access only to those admins where they can actually check, for the products, what are the products available in the warehouse, who are all the customers registered for our e-commerce website, what are the orders placed daily wise. So are there any pending orders? Are there any return orders? Right? So how so if there are any return items, so do we need to actually put them in the warehouse, or we need to get the products from more vendor registration? All this kind of information has to be done by the backend teams, right? So in order to maintain all this, so the backend team, admin team will also have some application which will be access will be restricted to only admins. So as a customer, you don't or ever see that application, how it is been done, or how the application looks like for the e-commerce. But the admin teams who work for that e-commerce company, right, they will have this access and they will actually manage all these kind of operations, right? So the orders, like different, so having, calculating or evaluating the products, what are all there in the store. So what has to be brought in from the warehouse, what has to be, returned, all these kind of operations has to be performed. And for all these operations to be performed, admin teams actually will be having a different application. For example, so if I click on this storefront, right, so you'll get the front end. Front end is simple. So you'll search for some products, and then it will just verify if you are human or not, and then yeah, it will give you the product, and then you click on it. You actually view some of the product specifications, you add to cart, and then you order the product, right? So this is straightforward. And coming to administration, so if you click on this, login and password demo, okay. So if you click on this, it says username and password. Yeah, seems like yeah. Okay, this is not working, but usually, okay, let me show you something else there. So this is how it looks like. So this is a different website, different e-commerce, admin website, admin URL, right? So if you see on the left, it is, first of all, it is not looking like normal front-end application for any e-commerce, right? So this is different. So if you see on the left, right, so you'll have different options: sales, what are the orders, shipments, what are the return requests, are there any recurring payments, gift cards, and customer related information, online customers, vendors. So activity log is like when the customer logged in, what action customers perform, all those kind of things. Then promotions, there could be seasonal discounts, right? So campaigns, all those kind of information will be present. So all this stuff is like admin activities, and this will be used or managed by the admin teams who are working for the e-commerce website. Usually, we will not have the access to this backend applications, but this some e-commerce practice websites actually gives us the access. So even this can be actually we can install this. We can actually download this LOP commerce or opencart, some e-commerce website applications, right? So they actually give us so they even give us the source code for this application so that we can download this, we can customize this according to our requirement, and we can deploy or we can actually develop our own e-commerce applications, right? One such one is like opencart. So we'll be using that. So this is opencart. So if you type in opencart, no, just opencart in Google. So you can see it is an online store management system developed by Hong Kong-based OpenCart Limited, right? It is PHP based. It uses MySQL as a backend database, right? So this information we need it because we are going to choose this application now for automating, for writing our project framework. We'll be choosing this application, right? So this information we need it. You can go through this information about this. So it's an online store management. So they actually provided the source code as well. So we can download it and we can customize it according to our requirement, and we can develop our own e-commerce application. But for this project, so we are not going to do that. We will be directly using one of them. Like so, if you go to this URL, so that is what has been done. So the application has been downloaded and it has been customized according customized. But if you observe, so there won't be much changes. So it will look like the normal opencart itself. So we'll be choosing this front-end application for automating. So if you want, you can even automate the back-end operations as well for any other e-commerce application, because this opencart one for this admin is not working. So you can choose any others for actually automating the admin task as well. But for this, for now, for our project framework, we'll be automating this. So we'll be choosing this URL, and we'll be picking up some test cases, and we'll be automating this website. So that that is what we are gonna do now, right? So opencart application will be the application which we'll choose. No. So we'll go through these phases. So till now, we have seen like theoretically what the framework is and all the other related stuff, right? Now we'll go through these phases. Now we wanted to develop some framework. So what did we discuss? In order to design any framework, what we wanted to do, we need to follow some steps, is what we said, right? So the first step is analysis. So during the analysis phase, what we need to do, we need to know the application. So the application and which technology has been used for this application and all that kind of stuff. We already started, right? So opencart application, you can view that here. So it has been developed using PHP. It uses MySQL as a backend and so on, right? That information we have seen. And this is the URL of it. And customers, in this application, there are like two activities can be done, right? The customers can perform some operations which can be accessed by anyone else, and admin activities only admins can access. So this application actually provides two parts. So front end only customers can access, and backend, like customers can access. Customers in the sense anyone can access. Admin activities, only admins can access. So that's what we have seen, right? Now we'll choose front end, like whatever a customer wants to actually, uh, whatever customer uses, this one, right? Front end. So this application will automate now as part of our project framework. So for that, we need to actually note it down some things like this is analysis base, right? So what will be our, so we'll actually choose the open cart one, right? So not in OP commerce. So we'll have the open cart will be our project name. And what's the URL? URL will be this. And what is the automation scope? Automation scope is front end, right? So this kind of information we need to note it down. So that's our analysis. And we are going to choose hybrid framework. Hybrid framework to automate our test case for our project. So that is also decided. All this kind of analysis is done. So we are going to choose this application. This is the URL of the application. And it has two parts, customer activities and admin activities. And we are going to choose the customer activities, right? Customer activities. You can say front end, or in bracket, you can mention customer activities. That's the scope. And what's the framework we are going to choose is hybrid framework. We are going to choose. So this comes under analysis phase. We are done with analysis phase. So we got clarity on what has to be achieved, right? Now we'll see the second phase. What is the second phase? Choosing test cases for automation. So we need the test cases for this application. So usually manual testing team. So they don't, in some companies, they don't be like separate manual and automation team. There will be one team who actually perform both manual and automation. In some cases, in some organizations, it will be different. Like there will be a dedicated manual testing team and a dedicated automation team, right? So anyway, like the writing the test cases will be done by the manual testers. So once we have the automation once we have the test cases written, right? Test case, we call it as test case document. So looking at the test case document, so the automation tester can have a can actually choose, or the automation test cases will be marked, which are the automatable test cases will be marked in some column, that those test cases can be automated. Then those should be picked up by the automation team for testing the, for writing the automation scripts, right? So let me open the test cases for this application. I already have the test cases for this. So let me open that. So these are all the different tests. So this is an open cut, and you have different test scenarios here, right? So uh, once you have all these test cases, right? So what did we say? So the test cases has to be developed by, so test case design and test case, uh, test cases document will be written by some manual testing team. So once these are done, right, so we can actually pick up this will be shared to the automation team. So this automation team has to actually, they need to have the minimum knowledge, like how the functionality, what's the functionality of the application, right? So at least they have to know the flow, the manual flow, right? They did not validate that flow, but at least they need to know how the manually how that has to be done, right? So the, for that they need to have the test case. So only they can understand only if they have that test case, right? So that has to be shared to the automation team. So once the automation team has that level of knowledge, like what has to be automated and the test case steps, right? So for example, so if you see this one, right? So it's an open cart, and you can see that functional requirement document, and you can see that we will have the document usually will have the test scenarios. So test scenarios, like the first scenario, what it will be. So the first one will be register, right? So for any front-end application, register will be the first functionality, first scenario. So we will validate the working of how to register for the account. Then comes the login functionality, right? So once you click on this, right? So it has a hyperlink. It will navigate you to the respective sheet. So register. So say for example, we wanted to test the scenario of register account. So that's a scenario. Again, scenario is divided into test cases. So all these comes under manual testing concept. So you have to have the minimum knowledge of that, right? So I'm going through directly. So the test scenario will have the test cases, and these are the test cases for one test scenario. So if you see, these are all the test case IDs. So for each test case, we'll have one test case ID, and test scenario will mention it. And this is the test case title. Say for example, we wanted to validate registering an account by providing only the mandatory fields. So the mandatory fields will be marked with star mark, right? So red color star mark. So we'll provide only the input for those mandatory fields, and then we wanted to check the functionality, right? Then we wanted to, once we register is successful, right? Registration is successful. Then we'll validate the message. So thanks for registering. Registering is what we'll get the message once we register successful. That message we wanted to validate. That will be our next test case. And the other test case will be like registering an account by providing all the fields. So earlier we provided mandatory fields. So now we'll provide all the fields, which are optional fields as well. We'll provide, right? And then test those fields. So and then we'll validate proper notification message are displayed for the mandatory fields when you don't provide. Yeah. So when you don't provide the mandatory fields, right? So the proper error or the message has to be there. Mandatory fields has to be filled up. That message is it displayed or not? That we will validate as part of one test case. And validate registering an account when yes option is selected for newsletter. So if you go to here, right? So my account register. This is the page we wanted to. So this is the scenario. Register account is what we wanted to automate. And we are discussing about the different test cases. So coming to this test case, so it is saying about this newsletter. So newsletter, it's a radio button. So what happens when you select yes? What happens when you select no? That kind of test cases we have written here. Like this, we have different test cases for this register account itself. If you see, there are multiple test cases we need to validate, right? So around like 28 test cases are there only for testing this 27, I guess. So there are 27 test cases only for a register scenario, right? Registering the account scenario, we do have 27 test cases, right? So all these has to be automated one by one. Now, once that scenario is completed, we'll pick up the login functionality. So again, you see a login itself has a separate sheet, and you can, by looking at the test case title, you'll come to know easily. We are validating valid login credentials, and then we'll validate with invalid credentials. We'll validate login into the application without providing any credentials, like this. Different test cases for this scenario called login, right? So like this, we have different scenarios altogether, right? So each scenario will have different test cases again. So each scenario here has been having different test cases. You can see here, right? Like this, each test case has to be picked up and it has to be automated. So in order to actually automate all these test cases, it will take easily like 3 to 4 months easily, right? So because we don't have that much of time, right? So we'll design the frameworks and we'll automate 1 or 2 test cases, and then so according to like your interest, you can actually extend that to n number of test cases. You can practice later, right? So once the framework is done, right? So all that you need to do is it will be very simple once the framework is done. You just need to pick up the test cases, read the test steps, and then just like automate the particular test case. So you'll come to know that once we see that once we automate one test case, so once the end-to-end flow is done, right? So then you'll come to know that extending or adding another test case, how simple it will be, right? So this is all about test cases, right? So these are all the test cases for this application, for this front-end application. And for each scenario, we do have the test cases in this document. So we can pick up each test case and we can start automating this test cases, right? So this is all about like test cases analysis. So choosing test cases for automation. Now we have what test cases has to be automated. We have that test cases, right? So we are not going to do this. Like you can even categorize this the available test cases into different sanity regression like that. We can mark it. But for now, we'll pick up only minimal test cases and we'll start the framework, right? So if you observe, we are going phase by phase for the framework. So we did our analysis, right? So we wanted, so this all comes under the analysis. Now we have seen the test cases, what has to be automated. So that is there in our Excel sheet, what has to be automated, right? So it is already there. Now comes the other phase, design and development of framework. So we have to design and develop the framework, right? This is very important and which actually takes long time. Design and development of framework. For this, we do have other document. Let me show you the document. So we'll follow the hybrid framework is what we said, right? So using hybrid or in the hybrid automation framework, we'll actually choose this technology. We'll use these frameworks. Like we'll have Java as a programming language and Selenium as an automation tool and TestNG as a TestNG, Maven, page object model as a frameworks, right? So combining all this, we are gonna write the framework, which we call it as hybrid automation framework. So how this framework works? So let me explain you at a high level. So this is what we'll follow. So remember, we are in the third phase. We are in the design and development of framework. And for this, we are gonna follow one document and we'll follow step by step so that there won't be any confusion for you. Even when you are developing some project, right? So you have to follow the same structure so that it won't confuse you. So you won't confuse and it will be very clear for you, right? So let me explain the framework at a high level. So once what we are gonna do is for each web page, we have discussed what is page object model. For each web page, we'll be having one page object class. So we are going to put all our page objects, page object classes, or for each web page, there will be one page object class, right? So all these page object classes will put under one package, under one project. We'll first create a project and under it, we'll create different packages. So one package will be for page objects. Under it, we'll have the classes, page object classes, one page object class for one web page. We have seen this when how to create a one page object class for one web page when we are discussing page object model. That we'll do it by creating one package for it. Then comes the test cases. We'll have one package for test cases and we'll put all our test cases under that package, right? And we'll have the utilities file. Utilities files are like we have seen Excel utility, right? So and also we have seen extent reports. So we'll have the extent report utilities as well. Utilities are the classes which we'll be writing and the methods which are like useful methods will be the methods will be written already by us and that we'll use it wherever it's required, right? So that utility files to actually keep track of those utilities, we'll create one folder within our project and we'll have those utilities placed there. And test data, to maintain the test data. Test data is different utilities, right? Test data is all about Excel files, is what we have seen. So all Excel files, to maintain all those Excel files, we'll create a folder called test data and we'll put all those test data in that. All those Excel files in the test data folder. And resources. Resources is different. Like we'll have config.properties where we can put our URL of our application. For logging into the application, we need email address and password, right? So all those kind of information, we'll put it in properties file and we'll load it whenever it's required. So log4j. So log4j is something called it's a logger. We can actually log something when we are writing the framework, right? So we can actually write some log statement. So usually what we do, we used to write it something in the system.out.println for our for our flexibility or for our information, what is happening at the backend. We wanted to see it, so we used to print that on the console, right? So that's only good for writing single test cases, right? So, but we are developing a framework. So this actually can be extended to a number of test cases. So you can't go through the messages within the console, right? So when you do system.out.println, the messages will be displayed on the console, and that is not a good practice to print on the console because there could be hundreds of messages. So we have to actually put them into some file so that we can refer that later, right? So for that to happen, so we need to use something called loggers, and that can be done using log4j2. So we'll see that even. So the configuration of that log4j2 will be kept under the resources folder, right? So all these will be read by the test cases. And once all this is written, done, right? So we will even maintain the folders for reports. So we wanted to generate the reports, TestNG reports and extent reports, right? So for that, we will create one more folder within our project and to actually keep the logs which are generated by log4j2, right? So again, we will maintain one other folder where we'll have the log files placed, right? So once we are done with this, we'll actually group the test cases and using the TestNG XML, we'll run the test cases, right? And we'll have the pom.xml where we'll have all the dependencies. So, so this is the flow, and this is how we are going to write the framework. So once this is done, right? So development and TestNG XML is used for the execution, right? So once this is done, right? So we can even push the code to GitHub, and then we can even see the Jenkins, like from how Jenkins can pick up the code from GitHub, and it can how it actually builds uses the build, right? So this we call it as CI/CD pipeline, the GitHub and Jenkins part, right? So mainly we'll focus on this part, hybrid automation framework, like how do we actually create the page object classes, test cases, and creating this all other stuff, folders for the remaining stuff, right? So this is what we are gonna follow now as part of design and development of framework. Is that clear? Hope it is clear. So I'm continuing. So we need to understand that architecture, and that will be our design in our case. And now we are gonna develop the framework. So for developing the framework, so again, like we'll follow this document. So this document will have the step-by-step procedure. Like first step will be creating a new Maven project, and we'll add the required dependencies in the pom.xml, right? And then we'll create the folder structure. We have seen in the framework, right? So in the diagram, like the folder structure. So in the same way, like we'll create this structure first, folder structure into the Maven project, and then we'll start the development. We'll pick up like one test case of account registration, and we will follow these steps one by one, right? So let's start there. Hope it is clear. Like any questions before we start the development of the framework? So the first step will be creating the new Maven project. So let's go to our Eclipse. Let's create a new Maven project. File new Maven project. So if you don't find it like this, then you can say new, and you will find this others, right? So just click on others, and you can try searching for Maven. So you can see Maven project here, right? So you can even create the Maven project like this. Select create a simple project, and then click next. Provide the group ID. So group ID, I'm going to provide it something like this, opencart. And then just say finish. This will be my project, right? So we'll not be using src main Java and src main. So this will be like for the development purposes. So I'll just delete this, and we'll use src test Java for writing our code. So let's go back now. So creating the new Maven project is done, and add required dependencies in pom.xml. So we need to add the required dependencies in the pom.xml. Why we need to add this? So because we wanted to work with Selenium, and we wanted to work with some third-party libraries like Apache PWA for data-driven testing, right? So each one we have to add it one by one to the pom.xml. So once we create the main project, open your pom.xml and start adding the dependencies. So how do we add the dependencies? So dependencies. And what's the first dependency? Selenium Java, right? So if you go back here, MEN repository, and then search for Selenium Java and take the latest version. We have seen this already, right? So I'm going fast. So just copy this and add it as a dependency. Like this. Next one. So what do we need? Apache Py, right? So go back and just type in Apache Py. Apache PY. Just take the latest version again. Like this. We can add all these dependencies which are mentioned here, right? So I'll add all the dependencies here. You can see once we create the project, it will have the model version. So version of the, so you can mention the version and you can see the group ID which we mentioned is there here, right? So we can even mention the project version as well here. And then we are including the dependencies. So we are including the dependencies in this order. So always remember you have to follow this document in order to develop the framework, right? So I have added the Selenium Java as a dependency to my project, then added Apache POI, right? Likewise, you should be searching for each of these in the MEN repository, in your MEN repository, and then add them, right? So let me add all the others. We have added all the others. I think I missed TestNG. I'll also add the TestNG. So you don't need to worry. I'm gonna share you this. Extend reports. We added all the dependencies which are mentioned in this document, right? So we'll follow this document. So this step is done. Adding required dependencies form.xml is done. So we'll see uh, Selenium Java is, we know, we wanted to add the Selenium Java for actually. So, okay, it is repeated. We can just remove this. For Selenium, right? So in the same way, like Apache POI is used for data driven. Log4j is used for loggers, and common sieve is used for some operations which will perform on the strings and numbers. We'll see that. That's for that. TestNG is a library, and extend reports is for reports, right? So that this step is done. Now we'll go to the next step. So creating the folder structure. We need to create this folder structure. So let's create this. So first we need to create the page objects. So we'll create one page objects package, right? So right click on SRC test Java, new package. So usually how we name it is like, so we usually name it as, so we can't name it, we can even name it like this, page objects. To store all the page object classes, we can name the our class like this. But usual convention is com dot. So if your company name is ABC, then ABC dot, then the package name. So this is the usual convention. So what I'll do is I'll put it something like this. Com dot opencart dot page objects is my package. So if you go back again, so what we need page objects, right? So we have created a page objects package, and we need something called test cases. So in order to actually put all the test cases, we need one package. So I'm going to create one package called test cases. Then we'll have test base as well. So we'll have some base classes which will actually inherit later. So let me create the package for that as well. test base. Then utilities. In order to store all the utility classes, we need one package. So we'll have all those classes in that package, right? Utilities. Type name must not be qualified. Okay, this is class. We need package. We need to create a package, right? So under this, we need to create a package. I'll call this as utilities. So these are my packages. So according to the hierarchy here, according to the structure, we need to create the packages. Then we'll create the folders, logs. We'll create one folder for logs, reports, screenshots, like that. So let me right click and create a folder. So you see an option called folder here, right? So we'll create a folder. We'll have the logs folder. We'll have reports. I'm going to create another folder, which I'll name it as reports for generating the report. The generated report will be placed into that folder. And then we can actually capture the screenshots, mostly when some test case is failed, and then we'll place them in the screenshots. Then test data, right? So we can create one folder for test data where we'll place for our Excel files. And I think, yeah, we are done. We are done creating the form.xml anyway, right? So if anything is required, like we'll create it later. But at initial stage, we need this folder structure to be created first. So once this is done, right? So once this is done, then we'll go to the next step again. So we'll start the development, right? What's the development? So what are the test cases we'll choose is account registration. So if you go to this test case document, so the first scenario is register scenario and login functionality. So these are the two scenarios which we'll automate. And as part of login, we first need to register, right? So we'll first automate the register functionality. So what is the register functionality? If you go back, so how do we actually register? So this is the, excuse me. This is the URL, right? And how do you register? You need to go to the My Account page, right? Yes. My Account page, and then click on register. So even before coming to this, so if you see here, once we navigate to this URL, so whatever you see here, right? So this becomes our home page, right? So this is our home page, and within this we have my account, and on clicking my account, you see the register. So you click on register, you see the register account page, right? And once we are here, we can provide these details, and then we can click on continue. So this is the flow we need to automate. So further to automate, what we need to do? So the test case is account registration, we know. So what we need to follow? So under it, we have some steps. We'll follow these steps one by one. So we need to create the base page under page objects, which includes only constructor. This will be invoked by every page object class constructor, right? So first we'll include under test base, under page objects, we'll include base page. Why we are doing this is for every page, right? Web page, we'll have one page object class. So each page object class will have something in common, right? So that thing we wanted to put it in the base page, and each page object class will be inheriting this base page. So let's do that. You'll get it. So create base page. Base page is a class name, and under which package? com.opencart.page objects. We need to create this, right? So let's do that. Right click. I'll create a class. I'll name it as base page. All right. So what we need to create here? So each page object class will have what it will have. So it will have some. It will be having the web elements and the methods used to interact in those methods. We will actually write the code to interact using those web elements, right? So we'll first have WebDriver, and then we'll have the constructor. If you remember page object class, we used to have the constructor for each web page, right? So that constructor will actually take the WebDriver instance. If you remember, this is all nothing new to us. right? So we have already discussed this in the page object. So then we'll pass the driver to it. And then once we pass that, we will use the page factory here. So we even discussed about page factory. Page factory dot init element. Page factory is used to initialize the elements. So this is the base page. So we need this code definitely for every page object class. So we'll be for there are like multiple web pages, right? So we can't repeat this code for each web page. We don't want it to do that. So that's the reason we have inheritance, right? Inheritance concept. So whatever the common part for any web page, right? So for creating the page object class, this will be definitely there, right? So we need definitely WebDriver instance, and we know according to the page object class model. So we definitely need a constructor for any page object class. So what we did was like we created a separate class and we had one constructor in it, where we if you remember in the constructor page object class, we initialize the driver and we also have this line of page factory to initialize the element. So that part, that common part we have written in one class called base page. So this base page, so we are gonna extend by all the classes. Like for each web page, we are gonna create one page object class and we are gonna extend this base page so that these properties will be present in that package as well, will be visible to that class as well, right? So let's do that now. So as part of this, so we have done the first step. We have created the base page, which includes only constructor. Yes, this will be invoked by every page object class constructor. So this makes sure we have the reusability. The code won't be redundant. So without doing this, right? So if you don't do this, this code has to be repeated for every page object class. So if you do this, then you just need to extend this class page object class, right? So the first step is done. So let's go to the second step. So creating page object classes for home page and registration page. So what is home page? Home page is this page. So once you navigate to this, so this is how the front end application starting page will be, right? So this is what we call it as, we are calling it as home page. And what is registration pages? So within this home page, so we have multiple items, right? So at least whatever we need is my account. We need to click on my account and then we need to choose register. All this is present in your home page. So we have to get the elements, web elements for this home page. At least my account web element and also register link we need to get it, right? Once you click on register, so you'll be navigated to a different page, register account page, right? So this we call it as registration page. This is a different page, right? So for this, we'll again create another page object class called register page. So these pages we are going to create again under com.opencart.page objects package. These classes will extend the base page. Yes, we know that, right? So let's create the two classes, one for home page, other for registration page, right? So under page object class, right? So I already have the home page written here. So let me put it here. We'll go through the code. So home page extends base page because we wanted to get this code, right? So we don't wanted to repeat this code for each web page. So we are extending this base page so that even though it is you are not writing this code, but this code is like indirectly present here in the home page as well. Just remember that. Now we wanted to call this constructor. So we wanted to call this constructor. So how do we call this constructor? We wanted to pass a WebDriver instance, right? So how do we pass it is in the home page. Again, we'll create a constructor for home page, each web page, and then we'll use super keyword. So you have to remember this, you have to recollect this. So super keyword is used to actually call the immediate parent class constructor, right? So we'll pass this, we'll use this super and we'll pass the WebDriver instance so that the immediate parent constructor, right? Immediate parent constructor is base page. So that will be passed to this. That's how the driver will be initialized, the base page driver will be initialized, and the page factory. So why we are initializing it? All this we are doing it for passing the driver to the page factory. So page factory init element, the driver will be passed and all the web elements will be initialized, right? So this is how we will follow. And why we are creating the home page? So we need the page object class for home page. So that's the reason we are creating the one page object class. And what it will have? So it should have the web element. So if you see, it has the web element. what it needs to have, we need to click on the my account, and we also need to click on the register link. So this is the my account link, and this is link register link. So, and then we need two methods for these methods, right? Two these web elements. So we need to click on the my account, and we also need to click on the register. So we have two methods for this. So this completes our page object class for our home page, right? So in the same way, so once we are onto the home page, so once we click on the register, so we are onto the register account page. So this is how the register account page is. So we again need to capture the web elements. We need to locate the web elements for this register account page, and we have to create another page object class. So that is this account registration page. So if you see here, again, account registration page also, this is again like one page object class, right? So this is also extending one page base page. So any web page. So for any web page, we'll create one page object class. All these page object classes will be extending this base page class, because every page object class needs to have the constructor, and within that it needs to have the page factory, right? So that's the reason we will actually extend this base page class. So if you see here, base page class and this is extended, inherited, and again, like we'll create a constructor for the local page object class, and then we'll use the super keyword to pass this WebDriver instance to the immediate page constructor, that is base page. No, all these web elements have been captured already, located. So very straightforward. All of them are already XPath. You can just locate it yourself. I already located it, so I have just put it here, right? So first name, last name, email, telephone. If you see first name, last name, email, telephone, password and password confirm. So password and password confirm have been there here. And agree. Agree is like I think this one, privacy policy. And then continue. Continue is button, right? And message confirmation. So if you provide some information here, so say for example like this, say for example you provide some password here and checked policy. Policy is like you can click on this policy and then click on continue. Okay. Okay. Password has to be 4 characters at least. Once I click on continue, what happens? So you see a message, your account has been created, right? Your account has been created. This we wanted to validate. So for that, we created another label, right? We are capturing that into another web element for message confirmation. Your account has been created, right? And then we have written the methods to interact with this element. So each web element has one method. So to set the first name, we use the web element dot send case, right? And we'll pass the first name. We'll see how we'll actually pass this actual data to these methods, right? We'll see that. So usually in the test case, when we are creating the test case, we'll pass the test data, right? So there we'll create the object for this account registration page, and then we'll call this methods by passing the actual values to these methods, right? So each method, almost all the methods are like till here are the input box. Input box accepts input, like right text boxes. These are the text boxes. So they accept some input. So we are using send keys method, and accept privacy policy is it's a checkbox. So we need to click on it, and button is also click, right? So continue is a button where we click on it. So we can use directly click method, or you can use submit method. So there are different solutions. You can go through this. You can even use the actions class. You can move your cursor over the button element, and then you can do click and then perform. You can even use the JavaScript executor. So different solutions have been provided here just for your reference, right? So you can use any solution here, right? We can use the send keys and use the keyboard written characters. You can use the external explicit weight and then click on the button. Once it is element is clickable, you can click on the button, right? So this is about the click continue method, where we'll actually click on the button, click button continue, right? So once we get the confirmation message, right? So we have the message here. So we are not going to validate it here. So if you remember, that's what the page object class, right? CS is, right? So page object class, what it says, so all the web elements and the methods will be here, but not the validations. Validations has to be put in the test cases, test case class, right? So we'll put there, but here, just to get the confirmation message, we have written one method. So message confirmation is a web element, which actually gives us the message, right? So we wanted this message. So we are returning this message. In order to return this message, we have written one method called get confirmation message. So when we call this method, this will actually return us the message confirmation. So with that, we'll actually write our validations in the test cases, right? So this is all about creating the page object classes. So we created two page object classes, one for home page and another for account registration page. So once we are done with this, we wanted to write the actual test case, right? So actual test case. What is the actual test case? Actual test case is to validate the test case, right? So usually the convention is like this: test case number, and then the name of the test, account registration test. Finish. So this has to go into the test cases package. So if you see here, we are done with the second step as well. So we created the page object classes for home page, registration page under page objects package, right? Now the third step is create account registration test under. So this is test. So it has to go into the test cases. So I'm writing it in, and I'm putting it into the test cases package, right? So let's put that into the test cases. Now we have to write the test case for validating the account registration, right? So for that, what we can do is, so first we'll write the setup method. We'll create the setup method, which will run it for the once before class, right? Yeah, we'll write, you can see here, right? WebDriver instance we have created, and then setup method, which will run once before the class, right? Before the class, we'll run it once. Yeah, it is gone. Now you see setup method where we'll initialize the Chrome driver or WebDriver to Chrome driver, so that Chrome browser window gets launched. And then what we do here, so we have an implicit wait, and we are actually navigating to a particular URL. We are maximizing the window. This is the part of setup. All right. Now we also need the teardown method, right? So let's also write the teardown method here. So this has to be run only once after the class. So it has to quit all the browser windows. So that's about the teardown. Now we'll actually write the actual test case. So we wanted to validate this, right? So validate the actual test case. So for that, what we'll do is @test and then public void. So we'll write a method. I'll call this method as validate account registration, and within it, what we need to do, we need to create the objects for this, right? So first we'll create the home page object. So first we'll create the home page object, right? So why we need to create the home page object? So if you see, we are using the home page object. So the page object class we have written for home page, and we are passing the driver to it. So see here how it works. So the web driver, so in the test cases, in the test case, we have WebDriver instance where we have instantiated it in the setup method. And then once the actual test is run, we are passing this to the actual home page. So when we pass it to the home page, so again, this constructor will be called, and it will act internally, it will calling the super driver. That is, it will actually call the immediate parent class constructor, that is base page. So it will be passed on to here. So that will be used for the initializing the page factory init element methods, right? So that's the flow. So once we have the page object, once we create the object for the home page, we can use that to click the on my account and as well as the register. All right. So this is done. And now we are into the register page now. account register page. Now we wanted to actually validate that page, right? So how do we do that? Again, we need to create the object for account registration as well. So account registration page, we'll create an account registration page, and then we'll use the methods in it. So if you remember, like we have created this, right? And we have all these methods in it. So we just need to call this method. So set first name. I wanted to pass some values to this. So to register the account. So these are my values, right? So this set password and confirmation password has to be the same. And then accept privacy policy. So if you see, it has accept privacy policy as well. So if you go back, this one, I have read and agreed to the privacy policy, right? It has newsletter as well. So all those have been done, and you can see we need to click continue. So this will subscribe will be by default no. So if you want, you can actually locate this and choose on yes as well. But for now, we will choose the default one no and continue. Click on continue, right? So click on continue is also done. Then we get the confirmation message. To get the confirmation message, we wrote the one method called get confirmation message, right? So that will get into the confirmation message object, string object that we are using it here. Asset has to be from TestNG. So you can see asset equals confirmation message. So it has to be equals to this. Only then we'll say that the test case is passed, right? So this is all about like writing one test case, right? So let's execute this. So when we execute this, what should happen? TestNG should pick up @test. So @test has been given for only one method, validate account registration, right? So that method will be executed. Yeah, just a minute. We are about, yeah, we'll close the session. Just a minute. It is done and the test is passed, right? So the account has been created, right? So like this, we can provide the values here and we can create the accounts, right? So this is about like automating one test case. So in the next session, we'll see how do we actually make this, it is random data, right? So how do we actually pass this data dynamically? That we'll see in the next session, right? So you can go through this recording and you can practice till here. So in the next session, we'll continue. I'm stopping here.